Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to share and subscribe the channel. The Valkyrie diplomatic chamber gleamed with polished obsidian and veins of luminescent blue crystal that pulsed like living arteries through the walls. Jackson Powell adjusted his collar, trying not to show how the artificial gravity settings, calibrated for the heavier Valkyrie physiology, made his limbs feel like they were dragging through mud. 6 years of diplomatic training, and nothing had prepared him for meeting a species whose cultural handbook listed showing weakness as the greatest taboo. Ambassador Powell, rumbled Captain Thorne from beside him, remember what we discussed. No direct eye contact until addressed. No sudden movements. And for God's sake, don't try to shake anyone's hand. Jackson nodded, keeping his expression neutral despite the anxiety churning in his stomach. Humanity had only discovered the Valkyrie 3 months ago, a warrior race with technology centuries beyond Earth's, and an empire spanning 12 star systems. The fact that they'd agreed to diplomatic talks instead of simply obliterating the human colony ships was already being hailed as a miracle back home. "I'm ready," Jackson said, straightening his spine as the massive double doors slid open with a deep, resonant hum. 7 Valkyrie stood in formation around a central dais. Their silvery blue skin seemed to shimmer under the chamber's crystalline lights, the intricate ridge patterns on their foreheads marking their clan lineages. They stood at least 8 feet tall, with powerful builds that made even Captain Thorne, a decorated war veteran, look small by comparison. But it was the figure on the dais who commanded the room. War Princess Nyroxa of the High Clan Drakes was everything the briefings had described and more. Her skin held a deeper blue tint than her companions', and instead of the metallic armor they wore, she was clad in a form-fitting suit of what appeared to be scaled leather, black with blue iridescent highlights that matched her skin. A ceremonial blade hung at her hip, its hilt embedded with glowing crystals. Her eyes found Jackson immediately, piercing silver orbs that seemed to evaluate his worth in an instant. "So," she said, her voice surprisingly melodic despite the translator's slight delay, "Earth sends us a diplomat barely old enough to have seen battle." Her nostrils flared slightly. Is this meant to insult the Valkyrie, or do humans simply not understand the gravity of this meeting? Captain Thorne stiffened beside him, but Jackson stepped forward with a calm he didn't feel. "War Princess Nyroxa," he said, offering the Valkyrie salute they'd studied, right fist pressed to left shoulder. "Earth sends you its best negotiator, not its oldest warrior." Among humans, the sharpest minds often belong to those who haven't been dulled by too many years of rigid thinking. A dangerous silence fell over the chamber. Several Valkyrie hands moved subtly toward weapons. Then, unexpectedly, Nyroxa laughed, a sound like distant thunder rolling across mountains. "Bold words from such a soft-looking creature," she said, descending from the dais with fluid grace that belied her size. She circled Jackson slowly, studying him from all angles. "You have no ridge patterns, no battle scars. How do Valkyrie know what clan you belong to? How do we read your status?" "We don't mark our bodies to show our allegiances," Jackson replied, holding perfectly still as she completed her circle. "Earth has moved beyond tribal distinctions. We're united as one species." Nyroxa stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her body. "And yet you arrive in separate ships, with separate insignias, speaking of separate nations. Your unity seems theoretical." Jackson met her gaze directly now, ignoring Thorne's sharp intake of breath behind him. "True unity doesn't mean erasing differences, War Princess. It means finding strength in them. Humans argue, compete, and challenge each other constantly. It's how we grow." "Interesting theory," Nyroxa said, her silver eyes narrowing. "The Valkyrie believe strength comes from submission to a clear hierarchy. The strongest leads. The rest follow." "And who determines who's strongest?" Jackson asked. A dangerous smile curved Nyroxa's lips, revealing teeth that came to subtle points. "Combat, of course. On Earth, we found that physical strength is just one type of power," Jackson said. There's also intellectual strength, emotional intelligence, strategic thinking. You speak as though these are separate, Niroxa interrupted. A true warrior's strength flows from all sources. She leaned closer, her face mere inches from his. Tell me, Ambassador Powell, what is your source of strength? The chamber had grown utterly silent. Jackson could feel Captain Thorne's silent warning radiating behind him, but he knew instinctively that his answer would set the tone for all future negotiations. Adaptation, he said finally. Humans survive because we adapt faster than any species we've encountered. We learn, we change, we evolve, sometimes within a single lifetime. Niroxa's eyes widened slightly, the first genuine reaction he'd seen from her. A curious answer, she said softly. Then, without warning, her hand shot out, gripping his upper arm with surprising gentleness despite her massive hand nearly encircling his bicep completely. You're armed, she stated, not a question. Standard protocol, Jackson replied, not flinching from her touch. Her eyes traveled down his body in a slow, deliberate assessment. Is that a weapon concealed at your hip, human, or are you simply anatomically different from us? The translator hesitated on the last phrase, as if struggling to find the appropriate connotation. Captain Thorne made a strangled sound behind him, but Jackson maintained his composure, even as he felt heat rising to his face. That would be my sidearm, War Princess, he said, carefully keeping his voice even. Standard diplomatic protection. I'd be happy to surrender it if that would make you more comfortable. Niroxa's lips curved into what might have been amusement. Keep it. A diplomat who comes unarmed to meet the Valkyrie would be either foolish or arrogant. She released his arm and stepped back. Perhaps humans are not as soft as you appear. She turned to the assembled Valkyrie. Prepare the negotiation chamber. We will hear what Earth has to offer. Then, glancing back at Jackson, and perhaps we'll discover just how adaptable humans really are. As she strode from the room, flanked by her guards, Jackson released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. What the hell was that? Captain Thorne hissed once the Valkyrie were out of earshot. Jackson adjusted his collar again, watching the doorway where Niroxa had disappeared. First contact, Captain. I believe it went rather well. She was toying with you like a predator with its prey. Maybe, Jackson said thoughtfully. Or maybe she was testing us. The Valkyrie respects strength, right? So I showed her a different kind of strength. Thorne shook his head. Just be careful, Ambassador. War Princess Niroxa has conquered 3 star systems personally. The dossier says she keeps the ceremonial skulls of defeated enemy commanders in her private chambers. Jackson nodded absently, his mind already racing ahead to the negotiations. Something in Niroxa's silver eyes had sparked his curiosity, not just the expected alien otherness, but a flicker of something he recognized, intelligence, assessment, and perhaps a hint of the same curiosity he felt. I don't think she's going to add my skull to her collection just yet, Captain, he said with a slight smile. In fact, I think we might have just found our first common ground. As they were led toward the negotiation chamber, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that this mission had just become considerably more complicated, and infinitely more interesting, than anyone back on Earth could have anticipated. 3 days into negotiations, and Jackson Powell was beginning to understand why the Valkyrie considered diplomacy a form of warfare. Every session in the crystalline chamber felt like walking through a minefield while juggling knives. The Valkyrie delegation sat across the massive stone table, their expressions inscrutable as they listened to his proposals for trade routes and knowledge exchange. Your terms remain unacceptable, General Kovacs growled, slamming a massive fist onto the table. The oldest of the Valkyrie present, his ridged forehead bore elaborate scarification that Jackson had learned indicated his status as a veteran of over 50 campaigns. You offer technological trinkets while requesting access to our quantum fold navigation. With respect, General, Jackson countered, maintaining the steady tone that had become his signature, Earth isn't offering trinkets. Our atmospheric terraforming could transform 3 of your contested border worlds from toxic wastelands into habitable territories within a decade. War Princess Nyroxa, who had remained silent for most of the session, tilted her head slightly. And what would stop humans from using the same technology to claim those worlds for themselves? The same thing that would stop the Valkyrie from using quantum-fold technology to appear unannounced in Earth's orbit, Jackson replied, meeting her silver gaze directly. Mutual assured destruction is a powerful deterrent, but mutual benefit is a stronger foundation for peace. A ripple of what might have been respect, or possibly amusement, passed through the Valkyrie delegation. Nyroxa's lips curved in that now familiar half-smile that never quite reached her eyes. Your species speaks of peace as though it's the natural state of the universe, she said. The Valkyrie understand that conflict is the natural order. Peace is merely a temporary agreement between potential adversaries. Then let's make it a very long-term agreement, Jackson suggested. One that benefits both our peoples. Nyroxa stood abruptly. We will consider your revised proposals. Until tomorrow, Ambassador Powell. With a gesture to her delegation, she swept from the room, leaving Jackson and his small team alone. Well, that went better than yesterday, remarked Dr. Harlow, the science attaché, closing her data tablet. At least no one threatened to disembowel anyone. Progress indeed, Jackson sighed, gathering his notes. They're testing us, pushing to see how far we'll bend before we break. And how far will we bend, sir? Asked Lieutenant Reed, their security officer, who had been silently observing from behind them. Jackson considered the question carefully. As far as necessary to secure this alliance, but no further. Humanity needs this partnership, but not at the cost of our core principles. As they exited the chamber, a Valkyrie guard approached, one of Nyroxa's personal squadron, distinguished by the blue-tinted armor plates. Ambassador Powell, the guard said, voice surprisingly soft for such an imposing figure. War Princess Nyroxa requests your presence for the evening meal cycle. Alone. Jackson felt his team's concerned glances but nodded. I would be honored. Lead the way. Lieutenant Reed stepped forward. Sir, protocol dictates. Protocol also dictates respecting our host's customs, Lieutenant, Jackson interrupted smoothly. I'll be fine. The guard led him through corridors that gradually transitioned from public diplomatic spaces to what were clearly more private areas of the Valkyrie station. The lighting shifted from the harsh blue-white of the common areas to a softer amber glow that was easier on human eyes. They arrived at an entryway adorned with intricate metalwork depicting what appeared to be battle scenes. The guard pressed a sequence on a panel, and the doors slid open silently. Enter, came Nyroxa's voice from within. The chamber beyond was not what Jackson had expected. Rather than the stark militaristic design that dominated the station, this room featured flowing curves, soft fabrics in deep blues and purples, and a panoramic viewport that revealed the stunning ringed gas giant the station orbited. A low table was set with an array of foods and drinks, some recognizably Valkyrie, others apparently prepared with human physiology in mind. Nyroxa stood by the viewport, silhouetted against the majestic planetary rings. She had removed her formal armor, wearing instead a simple tunic of some shimmering material that accentuated her powerful form while revealing more of her blue-tinged skin. Ambassador, she acknowledged, gesturing to a seating area. Join me. Jackson approached, taking in the unexpected intimacy of the setting. I admit I'm surprised by the invitation, War Princess. Nyroxa, she corrected. Here, away from the delegation, we can dispense with formalities. She indicated he should sit on one of the cushioned benches. Your negotiation style intrigues me. Most species we encounter either grovel in fear or posture with false bravado. And which approach tends to work better with the Valkyrie? Jackson asked, accepting a cup of something warm and fragrant she offered. Nyroxa's laugh was that same rolling thunder he remembered from their first meeting. Neither. The grovelers we conquer because they invite it. The posturers we destroy to prove their bravado hollow. Yet here I am, having done neither, sharing a meal with you, Jackson observed. Indeed. Her silver eyes studied him with unsettling intensity. You walk a unique path, Jackson Powell. You yield where yielding costs nothing, and stand firm where principles matter. It is not typical of species we encounter. Perhaps the Valkyrie haven't encountered enough species, Jackson suggested, taking a careful sip of his drink. It tasted like cinnamon and something else, something alien but not unpleasant. We have encountered 17 sentient species, Naroxa stated matter-of-factly. 15 serve the Valkyrie Dominion. 2 were deemed incompatible with continued existence. Jackson set his cup down slowly. And humans? Which category do you believe we fall into? Naroxa moved to sit opposite him, her movements liquid despite her size. That remains to be determined. Your species is young, scattered, technologically inconsistent. By all logical assessment, you should be easily dominated. She leaned forward slightly. And yet? Jackson prompted when she didn't continue. There is something in humans that defies simple classification. Your adaptability, as you mentioned in our first meeting. Your species thrives in environments that should kill you, creates solutions where none seem possible. That's kind of our specialty, Jackson acknowledged. Humanity's greatest achievements often come when our backs are against the wall. Naroxa's expression grew thoughtful. The Valkyrie have a concept, Kaveth Diran, the worthy adversary. One who challenges us to become stronger through opposition. She reached for something on the table, a small device that projected a holographic star map. This is Valkyrie territory. The blue-tinged stars spread out before them, covering an impressive swath of the galaxy. 12 star systems, 43 inhabitable worlds, hundreds of outposts, she continued. Built over 2,000 years of expansion. Impressive, Jackson acknowledged. And this, she added, is what your Earth might contribute. A new cluster of stars illuminated in green, bordering the Valkyrie territory. Not significant in terms of resources or strategic position. But here, she pointed to a particular region where the territories met, and here, these sectors have been contested by the Zavik horde for centuries. Your position could help stabilize our borders. Jackson studied the map carefully. So this dinner invitation isn't just about my negotiating style. You're showing me what I can't see in the formal sessions, the real strategic picture. Naroxa's expression was unreadable. Perhaps I simply wish to understand the human who stands before the Valkyrie without fear or foolishness. Or perhaps, Jackson said carefully, you're trying to determine if humans would make better allies than subjects. Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment, neither spoke. The tension in the room shifted into something different, something charged with possibilities. You've reviewed our formal proposals, Jackson finally said. What do you truly want from this alliance, Naroxa? Not as war princess of the Valkyrie, but as the person who will have to implement whatever we agree to. The question seemed to catch her off guard. For the first time, Jackson saw genuine surprise flicker across her features. No one has asked me that before, she admitted. As war princess, I seek advantage for the Dominion. Security for our borders. New technologies to strengthen our position. She paused, seeming to consider whether to continue. As Naroxa. I seek purpose beyond conquest. The glory of battle fades, ambassador. I have commanded fleets, conquered worlds, and yet. And yet it's never enough, Jackson finished for her. Her silver eyes narrowed. You presume much. I recognize much, he corrected gently. Humanity spent centuries fighting itself before looking to the stars. We understand the emptiness of endless conflict. Naroxa stood abruptly and moved back to the viewport. Your diplomatic skills are impressive, Jackson Powell. You find points of connection where none should exist. Jackson followed, standing beside her to gaze out at the ringed planet. That's another human specialty. She turned to face him, closer now than they had been before. Tomorrow, General Krovax will demand concessions you cannot give. He believes humans should be subjugated, not allied with. And what do you believe? Jackson asked softly. Nyroxa's hand moved with that same surprising speed he'd witnessed in their first meeting, but this time it came to rest lightly against his chest, directly over his heart. Through his clothing, he could feel the warmth of her touch. I believe, she said, her voice lowered to almost a whisper, that the universe has become far more interesting since humans entered our awareness. The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken possibilities. Then, as abruptly as she had approached, Nyroxa stepped back. You should return to your quarters, Ambassador. Tomorrow's negotiations will be challenging. Jackson nodded, recognizing the dismissal. Thank you for dinner, and for your candor. At the doorway, he paused and looked back. Nyroxa stood silhouetted against the stars, powerful and somehow suddenly vulnerable. For what it's worth, he said, I think humans and Valkyrie have more in common than either of us initially believed. Her silver eyes gleamed in the starlight. That, Jackson Powell, is what concerns me. As the door closed behind him and the guard escorted him back to the human quarters, Jackson knew that whatever happened in tomorrow's formal negotiations, the real diplomatic dance had only just begun. The warning klaxons tore Jackson from sleep, their shrill wail cutting through the dim lighting of his quarters. He was on his feet in seconds, reaching for the nearest clothing and his communicator simultaneously. Powell to command. What's happening? He demanded, pulling on his uniform jacket. Lieutenant Reed's voice came through, tight with tension. Unidentified vessels, sir. 3 of them, dropped out of nowhere. They've already disabled the station's outer defense grid. Casualties? Unknown. Station's been compartmentalized. We're cut off from, the transmission dissolved into static. Jackson grabbed his sidearm and moved to the door, only to find it sealed shut. Emergency lockdown protocols. He was trapped. Or so the attackers thought. 6 years in diplomatic service had taught Jackson more than just negotiation tactics. He pried open the control panel beside the door, exposing the internal mechanisms. A minute of careful manipulation later, and the door slid open to reveal a corridor bathed in red emergency lighting. 2 human security officers lay sprawled on the floor, unconscious or worse. Jackson checked their pulses, alive, thankfully, before continuing toward the command center. The station's layout was burned into his memory after days of walking its corridors. He encountered no one for several minutes, moving through eerily empty passageways. Then, rounding a corner, he nearly collided with a figure that was definitely not Valkyrie. The alien stood over 7 feet tall, insectoid in appearance, with a chitinous exoskeleton in mottled gray-green. Multiple arms, 4, Jackson counted quickly, each ended in a different tool or weapon. The creature's compound eyes shifted, focusing on Jackson with unsettling precision. Before either could react, a blur of blue motion slammed into the insectoid from behind. Nyroxa, moving with ferocious speed, drove her ceremonial blade through a joint in the creature's exoskeleton. It let out a high-pitched screech before collapsing. Ambassador, she acknowledged, extracting her blade with practiced efficiency. Her formal armor was missing pieces, and dark Valkyrie blood streaked one side of her face. You should be in lockdown. I'm more useful mobile, Jackson replied, gesturing to the fallen alien. Zavik Horde? Yes. Her silver eyes narrowed. You recognize them? We've studied your known adversaries, Jackson explained. What's their objective? Nyroxa wiped her blade clean with mechanical precision. The diplomatic chamber. All our negotiation data, security codes, star charts. She fixed him with a penetrating stare. They arrived precisely when both our delegations would be vulnerable. The timing suggests prior knowledge. The implication hung in the air between them. You think there's a traitor, Jackson stated flatly. Valkyrie or human? I don't know, she admitted. But we need to reach the command center. My security forces are regrouping there. They moved together through the corridors, Nyroxa taking point with Jackson covering their rear. Despite the circumstances, he couldn't help but admire the fluid efficiency of her movements, a lifetime of combat training evident in every step. 3 more approaching, she whispered, holding up a hand to halt their progress. Armed with sonic disruptors. Jackson nodded and reached into his jacket, pulling out a small device. Cover your ears, he advised, activating it and sliding it around the corner. A flash of intense light followed by subsonic waves that even Jackson could feel through his protected ears. When they rounded the corner, 3 Zavik lay twitching, their nervous systems temporarily overloaded. Part 3, Alliance Under Fire. The warning klaxons tore Jackson from sleep, their shrill wail cutting through the dim lighting of his quarters. He was on his feet in seconds, reaching for the nearest clothing and his communicator simultaneously. Powell to command. What's happening? He demanded, pulling on his uniform jacket. Lieutenant Reed's voice came through, tight with tension. Unidentified vessels, sir. 3 of them, dropped out of nowhere. They've already disabled the station's outer defense grid. Casualties? Unknown. Station's been compartmentalized. We're cut off from, the transmission dissolved into static. Jackson grabbed his sidearm and moved to the door, only to find it sealed shut. Emergency lockdown protocols. He was trapped. Or so the attackers thought. 6 years in diplomatic service had taught Jackson more than just negotiation tactics. He pried open the control panel beside the door, exposing the internal mechanisms. A minute of careful manipulation later, and the door slid open to reveal a corridor bathed in red emergency lighting. 2 human security officers lay sprawled on the floor, unconscious or worse. Jackson checked their pulses, alive, thankfully, before continuing toward the command center. The station's layout was burned into his memory after days of walking its corridors. He encountered no one for several minutes, moving through eerily empty passageways. Then, rounding a corner, he nearly collided with a figure that was definitely not Valkyrie. The alien stood over 7 feet tall, insectoid in appearance, with a chitinous exoskeleton in mottled gray-green. Multiple arms, 4, Jackson counted quickly, each ended in a different tool or weapon. The creature's compound eyes shifted, focusing on Jackson with unsettling precision. Before either could react, a blur of blue motion slammed into the insectoid from behind. Nyroxa, moving with ferocious speed, drove her ceremonial blade through a joint in the creature's exoskeleton. It let out a high-pitched screech before collapsing. Ambassador, she acknowledged, extracting her blade with practiced efficiency. Her formal armor was missing pieces, and dark Valkyrie blood streaked one side of her face. You should be in lockdown. I'm more useful mobile, Jackson replied, gesturing to the fallen alien. Zavik Horde? Yes. Her silver eyes narrowed. You recognize them? We've studied your known adversaries, Jackson explained. What's their objective? Nyroxa wiped her blade clean with mechanical precision. The diplomatic chamber. All our negotiation data, security codes, star charts. She fixed him with a penetrating stare. They arrive precisely when both our delegations would be vulnerable. The timing suggests prior knowledge. The implication hung in the air between them. You think there's a traitor, Jackson stated flatly. Valkyrie or human? I don't know, she admitted. But we need to reach the command center. My security forces are regrouping there. They moved together through the corridors, Nyroxa taking point with Jackson covering their rear. Despite the circumstances, he couldn't help but admire the fluid efficiency of her movements, a lifetime of combat training evident in every step. 3 more approaching, she whispered, holding up a hand to halt their progress. Armed with sonic disruptors. Jackson nodded and reached into his jacket, pulling out a small device. Cover your ears, he advised, activating it and sliding it around the corner. A flash of intense light followed by subsonic waves that even Jackson could feel through his protected ears. When they rounded the corner, 3 Zavik lay twitching, their nervous systems temporarily overloaded. Nyroxa gave him an appraising look. Standard diplomatic equipment. Special requisition, Jackson replied with a grim smile. Earth doesn't send its diplomats unprepared. They continued through the station, encountering resistance twice more, once a pair of Zavik sentries whom Nyroxa dispatched with terrifying efficiency, and once an automated security drone that Jackson managed to bypass with his command codes. Finally, they reached the command center's outer doors. Inside, they could hear the sounds of combat. "My team's in there," Nyroxa said, drawing her secondary weapon, a compact energy pistol. "Ready?" Jackson nodded, positioning himself on the opposite side of the doorway. On 3. The doors slid open, and they moved in synchronized precision. The scene inside was chaos, Valkyrie security forces engaged in close-quarters combat with at least a dozen Zavik warriors. In the center of the room, General Kovacs fought back-to-back with Lieutenant Reed, an unlikely alliance forged in necessity. Jackson targeted a Zavik approaching from Kovacs's blind side, his shot striking precisely where the creature's armor joined at the neck. Nyroxa moved like lightning through the melee, her blade leaving a trail of destruction. When the last Zavik fell, an eerie silence descended over the command center. "War Princess," Kovacs acknowledged, his massive chest heaving with exertion. "The station is compromised. We've lost contact with decks 4 through 7. What about the rest of my team?" Jackson demanded, looking to Reed. The lieutenant's face was grim. "Dr. Harlow is in the medical bay, sir. She was injured in the initial attack. The others?" He shook his head. "Unknown." Nyroxa moved to the central command console, bringing up a station schematic. "They came prepared. Disabled our communications, weapon systems, and engines in the first strike." Her expression darkened. "They knew exactly where to hit us." "How?" Kovacs demanded. "Station schematics are classified at the highest level." Jackson studied the damage pattern on the display. "It's too precise. They had inside information." He turned to face the assembled Valkyrie. "Unless your security codes have been compromised." "Impossible," Kovacs growled. "Valkyrie security protocols can be broken, like any system," Jackson interrupted. "Or bypassed by someone with access." Nyroxa's silver eyes narrowed. "You suggest treachery among the Valkyrie?" "I suggest we consider all possibilities," Jackson replied carefully. The Zavik couldn't have known about these negotiations unless someone told them. A tense silence fell over the command center. Valkyrie warriors exchanged glances, hands drifting subtly toward weapons. "Sir," Lieutenant Reed called suddenly from a secondary console. "I'm picking up transmissions. Encrypted, but definitely Zavik in origin." He worked the controls frantically. "They're coming from Deck 9, Section 3. Jackson saw Nyroxa stiffen. "That's my quarters," she finished, her voice deadly calm. "The private wing." Without another word, she turned and headed for the exit, her stride purposeful. Jackson moved to follow, but General Kovacs blocked his path. "This is Valkyrie business now, human," he growled. "With respect, General," Jackson countered, "if there's a traitor working with the Zavik, this concerns Earth as well. The safety of my team, of both our peoples, depends on finding the truth." For a moment, Kovacs seemed ready to physically prevent him from leaving. Then, surprisingly, Lieutenant Reed stepped forward. "Sir, Ambassador Powell has proven himself capable in combat situations. He may see things we would miss." Kovacs's ridged forehead furrowed deeply, but he stepped aside. "Go, then. But know that if human involvement is discovered in this treachery, then I'll deal with it personally," Jackson assured him, already moving toward the door. He caught up with Nyroxa in the corridor, her pace never slowing. "You didn't have to follow," she said without looking at him. "Yes, I did," he replied simply. They traveled in tense silence until reaching the private wing where Nyroxa's quarters were located. The damage here was minimal, no signs of forced entry or combat. "Stay behind me," she instructed as they approached her chambers. The doors slid open at her command, revealing her private space, now transformed into what appeared to be a makeshift communication center. Sophisticated equipment, clearly not of Valkyrie design, had been integrated into her personal console. And standing before it, fingers flying across the interface, was a female Valkyrie with midnight blue skin and elaborate ridge patterns that Jackson recognized immediately. "Cirilla," Nyroxa said, her voice a dangerous whisper. "My own blood sister." The female Valkyrie turned slowly, her expression showing neither surprise nor remorse. "War Princess," she acknowledged formally. "Explain yourself," Nyroxa demanded, her hand tight on her weapon but not yet raising it. "I do what must be done for the true future of our people," Cirilla replied calmly. "The Dominion has grown stagnant under leadership that values tradition over progress." "By allying with the Zavik?" Nyroxa's voice was incredulous. "They've been our enemies for generations." "They are a means to an end," Cirilla said dismissively. "As are the humans." Her gaze shifted to Jackson. "Your species was never meant to survive this encounter. Your deaths would have been blamed on the Zavik, pushing the Dominion into a war that would topple the current leadership." Jackson stepped forward cautiously. "And you would take control in the aftermath." Cirilla's lips curved in a smile that reminded him eerily of Nyroxa's. "With Zavik backing, yes. The Dominion needs new vision, new direction." "Betrayal is your vision?" Nyroxa asked, genuine pain bleeding through her controlled tone. "Salvation is my vision," Cirilla countered. "The Valkyrie expand through conquest, but we've reached our limit. We cannot defeat the combined might of the remaining free systems. We need a different approach." "So you staged this attack," Jackson pieced together, "to sabotage any potential alliance between humans and Valkyrie. To keep us isolated and vulnerable." "Precisely." Cirilla nodded approvingly. "You're perceptive, for a human. It's almost a shame you won't survive to." Her hand moved toward a concealed weapon, but Nyroxa was faster. A single shot from her energy pistol struck Cirilla in the shoulder, sending her crashing against the console. "Transmit abort codes to the Zavik vessels," Nyroxa ordered, her weapon never wavering. "Now." Blood seeping from her wound, Cirilla laughed bitterly. "Too late, sister. Their reinforcements are already inbound. This station will be destroyed, and with it, any hope of your precious alliance." Jackson moved to the console, studying the alien configuration. "May I?" he asked Nyroxa. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. Jackson's fingers moved across the interface, his mind racing through the encryption algorithms he'd studied during briefings on known alien communication systems. "What are you doing?" Cirilla demanded, her composure slipping. "Adapting," Jackson replied without looking up. "It's what humans do best." With a final sequence of commands, he stepped back. "There. I've rerouted her transmission through the station's emergency protocols. The Zavik ships should be receiving new coordinates now, directly into the path of the Valkyrie defense fleet that was supposed to arrive tomorrow." Nyroxa stared at him. "You knew about the fleet?" "That was classified information." "I made an educated guess," Jackson admitted. "Standard diplomatic protection for high-level negotiations. I'd have done the same." The console chimed, confirming the transmission's completion. Cirilla's face contorted with fury. "You've doomed us all," she spat. "The Zavik will not forgive this deception." "Perhaps," Nyroxa acknowledged, her weapon still trained on her sister. "But they will face Valkyrie justice first." She activated her communicator. "Security to the private wing." We have our traitor. As Valkyrie guards flooded into the chamber to take Cirilla into custody, Naroxa turned to Jackson, her silver eyes unreadable. You accessed secure Valkyrie systems without authorization, she stated. That alone is grounds for execution under our laws. Jackson met her gaze steadily. I saved your station and possibly prevented a war. I'd call that a diplomatic success. For a moment, tension crackled between them. Then, unexpectedly, Naroxa's lips curved into that now familiar half-smile. Indeed, Ambassador Powell. She holstered her weapon. It seems humans are even more adaptable than I initially believed. As they left the chamber, leaving Cirilla in the custody of the guards, Naroxa spoke again, her voice pitched low for his ears alone. You continue to surprise me, Jackson. That is not something I experience often. Getting used to surprises, he replied quietly, might be the first step in our new alliance. Her silver eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something beyond calculation there, something that looked remarkably like respect. Perhaps, she conceded, it already is.